Joining us now to talk about the very special relationship between the late Prime Minister, who passed away earlier today after suffering a stroke, and the great Ronald Reagan is Frank Donatelli, who happens to be chairman of GOPAC, and, of course, former Reagan administration official who joined us on Ronald Reagan's last birthday. Nice to have you back, Frank. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Steve. Great to be with you.
Well, thank you. You know, I have statements here on the passing of Margaret Thatcher from Mitch McConnell, Marco Rubio, John Boehner, Senator Deb Fischer. I could go down the list, and not one of them does not mention the special bond between Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan.
Well, as everybody's entitled to their own statement, but I can tell you that it was a very, very important probably the most important relationship of the 1980s. If Reagan and Gorbachev, with Reagan as the winner, negotiated the end of the Cold War, they couldn't have got to that point without the steadfast intervention and support of Margaret Thatcher. Reagan always considered her his indispensable partner when it came to implementing his policies that he hoped would eventually bring an end to the Cold War.
And in fact, it did, and it just seems almost that they were, I don't know, thrown together by destiny. What did Ronald Reagan? What we could see from this video, and we know from history, but maybe you could give us a little inside background on how he valued the relationship.
Well, they first met in, I think it was 1975, when Margaret Thatcher was not prime minister but became head of the loyal opposition, the Conservative Party. And I think Reagan, I don't know if he was governor or he was leaving as governor, but they immediately struck up a very strong relationship because they saw eye to eye on virtually all of the major domestic policies that their respective countries were facing: economic stagnation, lack of job growth, lack of economic growth, a bloated public sector, heavy regulation on the private sector. And they both felt that the antidote to that was the opposite of all of those things. And so when Margaret Thatcher got elected in May of 1979, Ronald Reagan, who was running for president at that time, remarked several times that he felt that was the blueprint, the way Thatcher combined her program to combat economic stagnation in Britain. He felt that that was the same kind of campaign that he needed to run in America, which of course he did and was ultimately elected. So they saw eye to eye on all of the major domestic policies. And so when it came to international policy economic policy coordination, try to rein in budget deficits, fiscal discipline, free trade, those kinds of things, and how to contain the Soviet Union, Thatcher ran a lot of interference for Reagan. The president running the transatlantic alliance is very difficult under the best of circumstances, and the United States, being the most powerful country, by definition makes the president the most important of the leaders. But the other leaders have a say, too. And he relied a lot on Thatcher to sort of broker agreements and keep the alliance together under very difficult circumstances.
Yeah, we're talking to Frank Donatelli here on the Steve Malzberg Show. When you listen, you talk about domestic policy and economics, and when you listen to either one speak, they had different styles, certainly. And Margaret Thatcher, as we just played before you came on, would have to defend her policies and have back and forth in the parliament, which is something Ronald Reagan in our system didn't have to do. But the message was the same. And if you go back and listen to that famous socialized medicine tape of Ronald Reagan that's all over the internet and I'm sure in his museum, etc. It's the same concept exactly as Margaret Thatcher. They despise socialism. They just cherished the free market.
Well, they were both elected in their countries when the economy was performing very badly. The economic stagnation in Britain in the 1970s was striking, and let's face it wasn't very great in the United States either. So they both had a mandate to really change things. I've heard a lot of commentary today from some sources that Thatcher was a divisive person. Well, you know what? All great men and women have to be divisive in a sense, because if you're thinking about the big issues and trying to make the tough decisions to make your country a better place, you're going to engender opposition from the status quo, from the supporters of the status quo.
Absolutely, Frank. And as you well know, Ronald Reagan has suffered from that, from the left, from the leftist media in this country to this day.
If you want universal acclamation, become a Hollywood actor or become a baseball player or something. But if you're going to get into politics and you want to do the hard things, you got to be prepared to take some brickbats, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's how that's why we settle things peacefully in a democracy.
That's right. Hey, Frank, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's been a busy day for you. I appreciate it.
Okay, Steve. Thanks a lot. Nice to be with you.
Thank you. Frank Donatelli, ladies and gentlemen, a former Reagan administration official and the chairman of GOPAC. And I have a feeling we'll be talking to him about certainly GOPAC in the not-too-distant future. All right, folks, when we come back, Dr. Jason Johnson, senior politics editor for Politics 365. Remember Melissa Harris Perry said that children don't belong to the family, they belong to the community? He thinks she has a point. I think she's out of her mind. We'll talk about that when we come back right here on the Steve Malzberg Show.